Hey guys, it's Lewis from Recycled Bicycle Sales here. In today's video, we're going to compare an entry level, a mid level, and a high level road bike. Which one is better and which one should you buy? The first bike that I want to look at is the entry level road bike. For me, entry level in the road bike scene, I would consider somewhere around the sort of $1,000 mark, give or take a few $100s there. Some typical things that you'd see on this level of bike are a carbon fiber frame, hopefully. That's considered a good thing. If it's an aluminium frame, it might be a little bit cheaper again. So typically carbon fiber frame and entry level components across the board. Some of those components could include aluminium wheels. It might include mechanical gears as opposed to the electric gears. And a really common one that we'd see is the rim brakes. This is the sort of bike that I would typically picture as somebody's first bike. It's their entry into road cycling. They're not sure if they're gonna fall in love with it yet, but they're happy to spend, $1,000, which is enough money to really give it a good hot crack. So this is what I would typically consider an entry-level road bike. Nothing bad, it's just a really good price point. This particular example here is a 2012 Giant TCR composite. So being the fact that it's 2012, or in general, anything pre-2016, I think, is a rim brake bike. Rim brakes are known for being easy to fix yourself, they're known for being well priced, and they're known for just being the only thing you could get up until about 2016 where these more powerful disc brakes came around. So this is a really common bike for the times in 2012. Got the aluminium wheels, having a look down at the gears. It's got Shimano 105 gears. I think it's got a 10-speed Groupset as well. Just a really straightforward bike. It'll be perfect for someone who's talking about just getting into cycling. When we move up to the mid-level of road bike, I'd class that at somewhere around 2,000, maybe 2,500, somewhere around that sort of bracket there. As we find our way up into that category, we'll typically see the more powerful disc brakes coming onto them. That's what I would consider the next sort of upgrade. We're still looking at the carbon fiber frame. We're still looking at the same racing road bike wheels. Sometimes, if you're lucky enough, you might even get some more carbon fiber on this level of bike. This example here has carbon fiber wheels, carbon fiber stem, and carbon fiber handlebar as well. Pretty common things that you might start to see in this sort of bracket. It still has the mechanical gears, so the same as what it did on the other bike there, but this one also, as far as I'm aware, it looks like it has some internal cables as well, as in the cables go inside the frame, so it looks a little bit sleeker. Whereas on the more entry-level bike, it had external cables, so they're on the outside of the frame. That's another upgrade that we might see when we move up to this mid-level of bike. And this one here is a 2016 Giant Defy. That means that it's only 4 years newer than the first one that we looked at. It's still Giant, so it's the same brand as the other one. It still has mechanical gears, so that's similar, but again, the big defining factor here is that this one moves across to having the disc brakes rather than the rim brakes. Also, this one is a Giant Defy. That one was a Giant TCR, so there's a slight variable there. This is a more comfortable style of bike, thicker tires and that sort of thing. This one has 11-speed Shimano Ultegra gears, so it has a wider gear ratio and a more performance-based gear ratio as well. Not quite the top level stuff, but definitely mid-level from when this bike was brand new back in 2016. And then when we work our way up to the high level road bikes, we start to see something like this. I would consider a high-end road bike in the pre-owned market again, because we are Recycled Bicycle Sales. I always talk about the pre-owned market, anywhere from about $4,000 and above. That's where we start getting some of these really fancy gadgets and gizmos that you don't need, but you really want. Things like, if I'm looking at this bike right here in front of me, I can see by looking at it that the first thing is that it has electric gears. It has the Di2 gears. This one has the 12-speed Di2, so it's a very current sort of bike as well. I think this is the 2023, 2024 colorway from memory. And this one's also a Giant TCR, same as, or similar to the two that we've already had there. So moving up to the electric gears is a pretty common thing that we'd see here. We can almost expect to have the disc brakes as well, now that we're in that higher level of price bracket, and even more carbon fiber again. I know that red mid-level Giant Defy that we looked at had quite a bit of carbon fiber, and this one has carbon fiber in the same spots, but it might have a slightly higher grade of carbon fiber. For example, this one has carbon fiber wheels, as that one did. It also has carbon fiber spokes by the looks, and it's a deeper dish carbon wheel, so it's a little bit more efficient and all these cool things. It's got carbon fiber seat posts. It's got a beautiful one-piece handlebar and stem, which also, I can't see any cables. No Di2 gear cables, no brake cables, no nothing like that. They're all hidden, not only inside the frame, as the red bike was, but also inside the handlebar and the stem. So it's an even more aerodynamic, beautiful looking finish. So this is what I consider a high-end bike. When we're looking at this high level of road bike, we might even find some tasty little upgrades. Things like a power meter on the cranks. There might be a strain gauge power meter that measures how much power you're putting out. There might be special ceramic bearings, you know, of really fancy high-end bottom bracket, or faster wheel bearings so the wheels can spin a bit better. You might find some of the typical sort of expensive upgrades on this level of high-end road bike. And also I think this bike is holding its value quite well because it is so new. Again, I think this is 2023 colorway or thereabouts. We're now in 2025, so it's 2 years old, which isn't really that old if we're comparing it to a 2012 bike. That's a whole lot older. So there's a bit of a value difference there. Also, I think if we were to compare this bike, a 2023 model, to a brand new in the local bike shop in the Giant dealership, if we were to compare them side to side, there's honestly not a huge difference between the two. It might be a colorway, it might be that instead of having the Continental tires, it's got the Pirellis. It might be small things like that, but truth be told, not a whole lot's changed. So that's where these more sort of high-end bikes in the pre-owned market seem like a really worthwhile upgrade. Now that we've got all three bikes here in front of us, now we can start our comparison. Let's talk about the frames first. If I look at all three of these bikes here, the first thing that I'm going to say is that they are all a carbon fiber frame. Here at Recycle Bicycle Sales, we sell the high-end sort of pre-owned bikes. So we tend to do $1,000 upwards. Hence the reason that I try and get everybody onto carbon fiber if they can, because it is so much more comfortable. You're more likely to fall in love with cycling, all that beautiful stuff. So here at my bike shop, it's sort of $1,000 upwards. So this is what I would consider an entry-level bike here at Recycle Bicycle Sales. Again, it still has the carbon fiber frame, the same as the top-end bike as well, but the differences that I can see with it is that it has the external cables as opposed to the internal cables. So the cables are actually on the outside of the frame there. You can see that metal wire running down the side. It's not a bad thing, it's just an older technology, but it is an older technology, which means that they've learned from it. They, as in the research and development team, they've learned from it and they've ended up going across to these internal cables like you see on the mid-level Giant Defy or the high-level Giant TCR. Again, I'm saying this by it not being a bad thing, it's just older technology, and that's where the price drop comes in. One thing that you'll notice is throughout the years of the cycling industry, trends tend to change. That can be things like the color. Maybe they were sort of pretty straightforward, black and white, and then we've worked our way across to having a funky color like a red or a yellow or a green, and then in these newer bikes, sort of are enjoying going back to the sort of normal colorway, I suppose, the real sort of understated sort of tones. This one, if you saw it in person, you'd see that it's actually like a dark blue color, but it probably almost looks black or gray on the camera, but it's a very sort of dull color. It tends to be the way that the market is trending these days. Not a good thing or a bad thing, just a thing, but I guess you can see the trend of what looked cool at the time through here as well. Speaking of looks, you'll see that the actual shape of the tubing changes a little bit as well. When we look at this early Giant TCR, it's a little bit of sort of teardrop shaped tubing. So instead of the tubes being perfectly circular, they're kind of like almost oval shape a little bit like that. And then we move across to this Defy here, that looks perfectly cylindrical. And then this one here almost looks a little bit like squared or rectangular tubing, which is, there's obviously a reason that Giant's gone down and done that, but that's something that you'll notice as well. It just does look quite a bit newer, and this one looks just a little bit older, I suppose. Another thing I'd say quickly with the frames as well is carbon fiber is carbon fiber. It's always going to feel amazing, but I suppose these newer carbon fibers are maybe a bit lighter or a bit thinner or a bit stiffer or a bit more compliant or a bit more whatever words the marketing team tend to use. But there probably has been a slight change in the actual raw materials. I'm also going to quickly mention the compatibility. When we're looking at these older bikes that have the external cables, you can't upgrade them to the internal cables, and vice versa. If you were to get one of these newer bikes and wanted to go across to having the external cables, you can't do that as well. So sometimes, depending on what products you're looking at, there might be some compatibility issues. The next thing to talk about once we're past frames is probably the biggest talking point on the internet for cycling, and it probably will be in our comment section below as well, the braking system. On these entry-level bikes, it's pretty common that we'd see these rim brakes, whereas when we move across to the more higher end or the mid-level bikes, it's not uncommon to see these fancy disc brakes come out. I'm not going to stand here and say that one is necessarily better than the other, because there are people on both sides of the fence, but if you want my actual opinion, we've done a video not too long ago about comparing rim brakes with disc brakes. And if you're unsure about which one you prefer, you might appreciate that video as well. Point I'm getting at here is older bikes tend to have the rim brakes. Newer bikes tend to have the disc brakes. The disc brakes are more powerful, but the rim brakes are easier to use. So for that reason, I couldn't say that one's necessarily better than the other. The disc brakes are just newer. So these two bikes here, the mid-level and the high-level bike, are both the disc brake. However, there is a slight difference between the two of them. In the mid-level bike, if we were to look closely, we can see that it's a 6-bolt brake rotor. That means that there are 6 bolts that are holding the brake rotor onto the wheel. Whereas when we move across to the high-end bike, we go back to the center lock system. The center lock system is easier to do, as in from a mechanical side of things. It's easier just to take a rotor off, put a new rotor on, take it off to clean it, whatever it is you're gonna do. It's a lot easier to work on. It's obviously a little bit more expensive as well, but a slight difference in the braking system. And while I'm down there at that sort of circle area as well, on this mid-level of bike, which was made in 2016 we were talking about, there was a very short period in the cycling industry when disc brakes first started coming onto road bikes, where some brands were the early adopters, Giant being included, Trek did it, Specialized, S-Works did it here as well, where disc brakes started coming on road bikes, but they didn't understand enough about through axles yet. So if you look closely, you'll see that on the red bike there, it's actually a quick release disc brake, which is quite uncommon. You tend to see the through axle as we do on this more higher end Giant TCR here. That's got the through axle system where you need an Allen key to take the wheel out. So I'm not gonna say that one's better than another again, but this is the way that pretty much every manufacturer does it. It was just a very short moment in history, 6 or 8 months, where some brands did these quick release disc brakes. Another difference between these disc brakes is on the red bike here, the mid-level bike, it's just a standard brake rotor. It's just a piece of metal bolted on, the brake pads touch it, slows the bike down. On the higher end bike, if we look closely, we can see that they call it ICE technology in Shimano terminology, but it's pretty much just saying that it's got a bit of extra metal there so it can help pull the heat away from the brake rotor, which can help it perform a little bit better. So the brakes are a little bit more powerful, and if you're doing a longer descent where you build up a lot of heat in the brake rotor, it will help it cool a little bit faster, which will limit how warped it can get. So the new brake rotors are just a little bit smarter. If we were to look at the group sets as well, on these entry-level bikes here, this one has a 10-speed group set. That means that it has 10 cogs on the back. It also has two cogs on the front, so it's got 20 gears total. Whereas this bike here, the mid-level bike, that one has 2 on the front and 11 on the back, so it has 22 gears. And then this higher end one here has 2 on the front and 12 on the back, so it has even more. It has 24 gears on the back. That means that you've got more gears to pick from, 24 as opposed to 20. You've got 4 extra gears to pick from. Hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier to go up the steep hills. Usually a slightly larger cassette on these newer bikes because you have more cogs to pick from. So I was to go back to this one, the more entry-level bike, it has a mechanical group set. So you click a lever to be able to change the gears on the shifters here. When we move to the mid-level bike, it also has the mechanical gears, but the disc brakes, so a bit of an upgrade there. But on these higher end bikes, typically sort of $4,000 and above, you can often expect to get electric gears, whether it's Shimano's Di2 or SRAM's Axis. You can expect to get Di2. Also, I'm going to quickly mention the replacement cost for different consumable parts. On these entry-level bikes with the rim brakes, this example is an aluminium rim brake, these brake pads are about $10 per wheel, whereas if we would look at these disc brake bikes, these brake pads are about $40 per wheel. So significantly more expensive. 10 bucks, 40 bucks. I think there's a difference that's big enough that it's worth noting there. Also, what else have we got? The gear cable. I keep talking about how this one has the mechanical gears. If you were to snap a gear cable and needed to replace it, this gear cable, excluding labor, this gear cable is about $5. Whereas if you were to break a Di2 wire on this bike, which to be honest, it would be pretty unlikely to happen, but nonetheless could happen. If you needed to replace a Di2 wire, it's more like $45 as opposed to $5. So significantly more expensive. You'd be pretty damn unlucky to need to do that though. Even if we're talking about simple things like the chain or the cassette, a chain, to be honest, not a huge difference between the price of chains. I think you can get a 10-speed chain from like 50, 60, 70 bucks. But if you looked at these 12-speed ones, the really new ones, very similar, maybe like 10 bucks more. Instead of it being like, you know, 50, 60, 70, it might be like 60, 70, 80. So not a huge difference there. And So chain is not a non-variable, but it's not a big variable, but cassettes is somewhere that you might find a bit of difficulty. 10-speed, not all bike shops hold 10-speed stuff in stock anymore. I know that being someone who's worked with Shimano dealers before, I know that Shimano, the actual wholesaler Shimano, only holds stock for up to 10 years. So once the product is now 11 years old, which this one is, they don't hold that stuff in stock anymore. So getting cassettes, getting chains, getting this, getting that might be a little bit more difficult to get. With that being said, when Shimano made their chains, they would have made a squillion of them, which is a lot more than a million, but they've obviously sold lots of them, but they wouldn't have completely sold out. It's gonna take quite a while before they actually sell out, but it's just something worth noting. If you walked into the bike shop and said, I've got a bike and it's a 10-speed and it's got an 1125 cassette and I want to go to an 1130, they might not have it. I'm not saying they won't, I'm just saying they might not. Whereas this one here, the latest and greatest bike, they will have it in stock because it's the latest and greatest thing. Since you're watching this video, I'd imagine that you're probably either watching it on your TV or your laptop, or you're watching it on your mobile phone. If you're watching it on your mobile phone, you are already completely aware that we have so many apps on our phone, so many applications, you know, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your YouTubes, all this sort of thing. There's also an app that you can get so that you can adjust the gears on one of these newer bikes. Shimano call it eTube, which is a nice little app that you can pair your phone with your bike through Bluetooth and you can adjust the gears. So you can literally be your own mechanic at home through your phone. You don't have to reach down with tools and adjust cables and this and that. You just plus or minus, positive or negative, and adjust through the gears on there. So as the world would of course go with technology these days, there's an app for your new bike, which I think is pretty cool. The next thing I want to talk about is accessories and miscellaneous and upgrades and that kind of thing. When we look at these entry-level road bikes, what we'll find is that most of the time they're running maybe a 23mm or a 25mm tire, pretty standard number. Whereas when we move across to these newer ones, tires are a really big talking point, especially in the current industry. Tires are wider, they might be tubeless, they might be grippier, they might be better puncture protection, they might be this, they might be that. There's so many different types of tire that we can look at now. And I just mentioned there as well, tubeless. Tubeless is a really big talking point in the cycling industry at the moment. From my experience, I think that maybe 2 out of 10 road cyclists tend to go tubeless, but 2 out of 10 is still 20%, which is a pretty large percentage of people that like to go up to the tubeless upgrade. So if you're interested in tubeless, you might want to do some research into that. Or if you want to know more, let us know in the comment section below and I can take you for a deep dive into tubeless. We have done a video about how to set it up tubeless, but I don't think we've done a video about why you would want to set it up tubeless. So let me know in the comment section below and we can do that if we need as well. It's also worth mentioning here, and I'll talk about it in that video if we do it anyway, that you can't really go tubeless on these older bikes, especially these rim brake ones. It does need to be one of these newer bikes. There's a few compatibility issues or incompatibility issues, I suppose. Special rim tape, special tires, sealant, different valves. Are they strong enough to hold the pressure? Variable here. There's lots of different things around the place. So upgrading to tubeless is cool, but it's not always something that you can do. So just sort of keep that in mind throughout your research. Some other things I might mention with accessories are even something as simple as lights. I know that on an entry-level bike like this that has the external cables, the standard aluminium handlebar, it looks quite normal. A light, as in a flashing light to be safe on the road, might just elastic strap around the handlebar so your light can be pointing forward. Whereas as we move our way further up, especially to these fancy integrated cockpits like this, you can get special mounts so that the light is bolted on underneath. That kind of means that you can't even see it unless you were to like flip the bike upside down and have a look under there. So that's kind of cool. I think you can make the bike look a little bit more sleek. Included in the light, I could say the same about your GPS mount, your Garmin or your Wahoo or your Brighton or something like that, that it can be perfectly in the center of the handlebar rather than just being strapped onto the side. It just makes the whole thing look a little bit cooler, I suppose, look a little bit neater. Another difference that you might see with some of these newer bikes is some of them, especially the more endurance style of bikes like a Trek Domani or that sort of thing, you can actually remove the bottle cage and it will have internal frame storage, which kind of makes it so that you don't need to have a saddlebag with all your spare tube and your repair kit in there because it's hidden inside the frame. Again, not a good thing or a bad thing, just a technology is moving along and you might want to take use of it sort of thing. But that's something that I've seen on some of these newer bikes as well. So even though I've gone through here and I've mentioned a few different differences between these bikes, just remember that not a whole lot's really changed at the end of the day. They've still got 2 wheels and a frame, they've still got a handlebar, they've still got a saddle that you sit on, they've still got a brakes, a way of slowing the bike down, they've still got gears. There's a lot of things that are similar in that sort of Venn diagram, but there's a couple of things that are a little bit different. So this is not me saying that one is necessarily better than another. This is just me trying to give you information so you can understand what you can expect at different price points. Now let's talk about other things like weight or handling, because they obviously are a newer style of bike. So now moving away from talking about what they are, let's talk about what they feel like. I'm talking about the weight and just in general, how the bike feels when you're out riding. On these rim brake bikes, it's pretty common that they're quite a lightweight bike. These disc brake systems, the more powerful braking systems, do tend to add a little bit more weight. Not always, I suppose there's variables in the super high-end, ultra fancy bikes or the super budget friendly, you know, rim brake bikes, I suppose. There's, I suppose, variables in that as well. But as a pretty average rule of thumb, these disc brake bikes do tend to be a little bit heavier. But let's see what the actual weight difference is between these bikes. Quick disclaimer I'm just going to throw out here before we do this, is that this is a very unfair comparison. This is a small frame, so like a 50 centimeter, and these two here are both 56 centimeters. So there's more material on these bikes because they're larger. So we'll do it anyway. It'll give you a bit of an idea, but just take that into account before you follow this like the Bible. 8.26 kilos. Interesting. Okay. 8.13, so what's that, 100 odd grams lighter? I honestly thought that it was gonna be a lot heavier than that, if I'm being honest, so that's pretty good. 7.23, okay, that's quite a bit lighter actually. Yeah, okay, that is what I expected actually, I thought, because this is a very fancy high-end bike. It's got everything that can be carbon fiber is carbon fiber on this bike. So I was expecting it to be super sort of high-end, but I was honestly surprised that that one was over 8 kilos because it's such a small frame size. So interesting. I'm not going to say that any of that's good or bad, but that kind of gives you a bit of an idea of the sort of weight difference between the different price points of bike as well. So now that we know that, how about we head outside and take them for a test ride? So here we are with the more entry-level road bike. I'm just going to pedal around the car park. There's nothing specific I'm looking for. I'm just going to ride around and see what I can notice and mention to you. Yeah, let's give it a try. First of all, it's way too small for me. Gears feel pretty good. Brakes feel good. I'm not worried about it locking up and doing a skid or anything. That rear tire pressure is a little bit low. That's probably something as well. Some steering feels good. It all just feels solid, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. The brakes felt good. They didn't feel like they were gonna do a skid or wash out on me. I didn't hear any crazy rattling noises or anything like that. Just feels like a bike, to be honest. I'm gonna try the next one up, the mid-level bike, and we'll see how that goes. Yep. All right, let's try the mid-level bike now. First of all, it fits me better. The handlebars feel really high. To be fair, it's a giant Defy, not a giant TCR, so maybe that's different. I can hear the tires gripping more. Maybe they're wider. The brakes, I can feel the brakes like grabbing. They're so like, just so solid. Even just with like one finger, I feel like I could make it do a skid, which is kind of cool, I think. It just felt a little bit more solid, a bit more planted. But yeah, the brakes is definitely something that I noticed. Even just the lever in my hand is quite a bit larger. There's just more stuff going on there in my hand. It's not like in like that, it's a bit more open. Not a good thing or a bad thing, just a thing. Yeah, I'm gonna try the high-end one as well. All right, and now we're ready to ride what I would consider a dream bike. This is one of the real fancy bikes. Let's take it for a ride and see what we notice. Okay, free hub's really loud. That was the first thing. These are really narrow handlebars. Those brakes are crazy as well. I reckon if I did, yeah, enough front brake, I could lift the back wheel off the floor. That's how powerful it is. I can hear the brakes actually making noise on the brake surface. I can actually, like as I brake, I can hear it making a noise. It's just solid, man. Even just pedaling around, changing gears then, There was no thinking time. It just dropped straight into the gears. Yeah, the levers felt big again, but to be honest, they felt smaller than the mid-level bike. Maybe that's because it's got the electric gears instead of the cable, but I knew it was gonna feel awesome, and it did. So it was exactly what I expected it would be. Yeah. Let's jump inside and debrief, I reckon. Well, that was a bit of fun outside, and to be honest, it was pretty well everything that I expected. They're all really nice bikes because they're all bikes, to be honest. They're all the carbon fiber frame, they've all got ways to slow the bike down, they've all got gears so I can shift into a harder, faster gear or an easier, slower gear. They all feel just like a bike. A theme that I noticed when we moved across to these disc brake bikes is they were significantly more powerful. Instead of using 3 fingers to brake, I could use 2 or even just 1. That's kind of cool, I suppose. But with that being said, I don't think that it was necessarily bad having these rim brakes. So that brings me back to the start of this video, which was who should buy what? I'm gonna say all of these bikes are awesome and you'll be absolutely stoked on any bike that you buy. So my answer is buy whatever bike's within your budget. If you have $1,000 or $1,200 spare, you will be stoked with the bike that you pick up. But if you've got 4 grand, 5 grand, 10 grand to spend, you'll be pretty stoked on that bike as well. So I don't think that one is necessarily the one that you have to go for, and you'll be disappointed if you get the other one because they are all pretty damn awesome. There's obviously benefits and pros and cons moving from one to another, but none of them should discourage you from just buying a bike. So just get onto a bike. How about you? What's your opinion? Which bike do you think that you would buy? What bike do you reckon that people should buy? Was it one of these ones here, or do you reckon that they're all pretty average and none of them are very cool? Whatever it is, let me know in the comment section below. And I love reading through all those comments, so leave something down there for me to check out a little bit later. Otherwise, I'm gonna say thanks for watching and we'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.